Hi, I'm Alan Shuptrine. Welcome to another No Fear Watercolor. I want to thank the Greenville Center for the Creative Arts for putting this together, Liz Rundorf and all of her staff. I just love Greenville, South Carolina. Actually, I'm going to be there July 25th and 26th for a 2-day watercolor workshop. So if you're interested in learning how to do watercolor realism and maybe learn how to control the medium and so forth, please go to their website for more details, or go to their, stay here at their Facebook page and you can look up all the details. Would love to see you there. Okay, today we're going to paint watercolor waves. I'm going to show you how I do it and many different ways of doing it. And this is going to be more of a beginner's type of demo, but we can get into more details later, if we have enough interest. Okay. My beautiful wife Bonnie is behind the camera. We have a gorgeous day today. We have beautiful weather, looking out at the western view toward the Cumberland Plateau. And Bonnie, as usual, is going to walk around and look over my shoulder and sort of give you the first person perspective of what I'm working on. Okay, let's get started. All right, so what I've done, I'm just working in an 8x10 fashion today, and just planning out my watercolor. Some of you took some of my previous, have seen my previous demos and my other lessons, and so you know a little bit about what I teach when I teach linear perspective. But for this watercolor today, we're going to be pretending that we're sort of looking down at the water, and so that way we can focus our attention on the spaces between the waves. So in order to look down on a subject, you have to raise the horizon line within the field of the canvas, or in this case, the paper. So I'm showing less sky than I am water, and so this is my plan. And then what I've done is I've gone ahead and taken a sheet of watercolor paper and taped it off with frog tape, which is my favorite tape. They're not paying me to say this, but this is my favorite masking tape for watercolor. It gives a nice, crisp, sharp line. Frog tape, if you're listening, I'm available for endorsements. So what we do is we tape the horizon line off, and then I've painted some clouds and a little bit of pink in the sky just to give us something to work with, because today we're going to mostly be focusing on water. You might also be able to see some little lines that are visible under the tape and kind of some here on the paper, and that's because I've actually put some lines on a piece of tracing paper that are graduated lines, so that we can show the viewer that there is a less and less amount of space in between the waves as we go up to the horizon line. And then in addition to that, I've also done on a piece of tracing paper perspective, so that I can know that this is my vanishing point, and that the various different waves and the architecture of this painting will kind of vanish toward one point, as we see in a lot of Western art, and then go out in all directions. So with the two of these laid upon one another, you can easily see how this painting and the architecture of it is going to come together. And of course, I'm just making this painting up. I'm not going by a photo or anything, because that's not needed for this quick demo on waves.
And you're not at the beach.
Yeah, plus I'm not at the beach, and but it would be much better at the beach. So, all right, so once you have this masked off and you have your sky painted in, then you need to actually remove the tape. And a lot of my students have trouble removing the tape without actually getting the skin of the paper removed too. So what you want to do is just warm it up for a few seconds with your hair dryer, and that will let the tape really release well. So let me do that.
I'll go get it.
Don't need those other sheets.
Okay.
Okay. And that, then the tape will remove right off of there, and you have a nice, crisp, even line for the horizon. Then, as you can see, I've actually drawn in very faintly some horizontal lines to just kind of keep me, as I'm drawing in my waves, just to kind of keep me horizontal and on plane. And so what I'll do now is take a pencil and I'll just draw in a couple of waves that I want to show up front. And here is where I actually decide how big the largest wave will be to the viewer. So I might actually create a wave that has a number of different peaks on it before it comes back down like this. And then over here, I might do another one, but this time much smaller. And you can see as I'm staying between my graduated lines, I'm already beginning to create distance between waves, because in that way I'm keeping them going off into the distance. And this way, as I create my waves and they get much, much smaller and I stay, now I'm actually sketching this in a more organic fashion, and it's not near as planned. I don't want anything really restrictive on this, but make sure that your waves sort of weave in and out with one another. They're much like mountains. And in today's demo, I'm actually going to be painting the top of the wave very, very dark, and then letting the paint fade as it goes down into the belly or the space between the waves. Okay, so for today's colors, I'm using just a very, very limited palette. I'm going to get that beautiful seafoam green color. And I'm going to start out with cobalt blue. And you can see that I've already used this palette. I used some cobalt up in the sky of the painting. I used some burnt sienna. And then I used some permanent rose for the slight pink against the horizon line. So I'll start out with some cobalt blue. I'll put a little bit of French ultramarine blue in there as well, because sometimes the cobalt just simply by itself, it's a very weak blue.
Are these Winsor Newton?
And yes, these are Winsor Newton pigments. So Winsor Newton, if you're listening, I'm available. So here's some burnt sienna. I love burnt sienna, one of my favorite colors. And then to get the green in the seafoam green, I'm not going to actually use Hooker's green, which is the green that's in my palette, but I'm actually going to use ochre yellow. Okay, so I'm going to take this is called a cat's tongue brush. I'm going to take this cat's tongue brush. I'm going to mix some cobalt blue and ultramarine blue together, and then go up and get some burnt sienna, and just to kind of dumb that color down a little bit. And then I'm going to go get a little bit of ochre yellow. And right up here at the top, the color that I haven't told you about is a little bit of cerulean blue. And that is always a good color to use in any kind of oceanscape, because it's a very, very vibrant blue, much brighter than the cobalt blue. So just a little bit of ochre yellow, a little bit more cobalt blue until we have the color right and what we really, really want. I'm going to put just a little bit more ochre. There we go. All right, now, so that's a good color for our wave.
Well, wait a minute. What size brush are you using?
This is a number 14.
Okay.
To give you an idea of how big it is, it's probably about 5/8 of an inch wide.
Okay.
Okay. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to choose one of these waves that I've actually drawn, and might as well choose this one that's really, really close to us. And you'll notice that in most of my landscapes, I start from the back and work my way toward the viewer. But for this demo, I'm not going to do that, because I want to show you how easy it is to pop a wave in behind one that you've already drawn. So just using the paintbrush, I'm actually going to draw this wave with color, because that's actually what painting is, right? And just going to bring the dark part of this wave down in that shape. And now I'm going to immediately go in with some water. You'll notice that I've got my water below grade over here. That's because I'm so clumsy, I always spill my water. And now I'm going to wet this color, and that way it fades to almost nothing but white down at the bottom. And that's what we want. We want a nice gradient between dark at the top of the wave coming down to white. And so then what we do is we go get some more color and step over and above this and actually jump in behind this and do another wave right behind this one, as you can see. And I'm doing this really, really quickly. Each time I have to have water. And then I'm going to wet that and let that fade down to white as well. Now, you can see how that wave is much, much smaller. We're already telling the viewer, oh, okay, this is going off in the distance, so the size of the objects are getting smaller and smaller. And some of my repeat students that have been taking lessons from me, they probably remember the 3 things that you can create distance with in any kind of painting. One is your focus, the focus of an object way off in the distance. Our human eye sees things quite differently than because we can only focus on one thing at a time. And so you can use focus as a tool
to actually create distance, and also temperature, and then of course the size of an object in relation to its surroundings. So you can see we already have a nice weave here going where we have various different waves and getting gradually smaller as we go up. And let me do another one way up here in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to do this wave right here, right out in the center, and just paint it in, and then I'm going to actually, and each one of these waves is shaped differently. Don't paint them all the same. You know, notice how this wave here just has one peak at the top. See that? Now, you may say, well, isn't that a really, really wide wave? Of course. But then what I'm going to do is go in and take watercolor and cut in over the top of this one. I'll show a wave that's in front of that. And now all of a sudden I've pushed that wave further back. And so by weaving these waves in such a way, we can actually end up with a beautiful ocean. So I can continue on, and as I get farther and farther out, I'll actually use my misting spray. So here's some misting spray here. This is my mister, and I'll actually mist this entire area back here. And I don't want it super, super wet, but I just want it damp. I'll go to a smaller brush. This is a, well, it's probably a number 6. It's so old that the lettering has worn off, or the number.
Where do you get your mister?
I bought my mister online, but I think you can buy one of these really fine misters at pretty much any box store.
Who gave you your first mister?
You did, I believe.
That's
So,
right.
okay, so way back here in the distance, you know, these waves here, they need to be very, very, this is all done on a super, super damp, but not really wet surface. And all I'm doing now is just very, very organically almost sketching these waves in, leaving plenty of white going off in the distance. I did a TV show one time where I actually did a demo on TV, and they were so scared that I wouldn't talk all the way through it, that it would just be the sound and the friction of my brush and the paper going across the page, and it might be too boring to watch, but I somehow managed to talk all the way through it, even though I talked about golf and other things. So, but you can see now, you know, off at a distance, you know, these look like super, super distant waves. Now I'm going to start painting them much larger than that. So I'm going to go to a larger brush that'll carry more paint. And now I've kind of run out of my color. So let's go back in and mix that same color again. This is the part that a lot of students have trouble with, matching the color that they just mixed up. That's why it's always a good idea to leave a little bit of the color on the actual palette, and then that way you can go back and see what you just mixed up. Now, I've also lost a little bit of dampness here, so I'm going to go back in. Now, using this brush and a little bit larger, I'm going to go in and paint even larger waves. And those are kind of coming out dark, so I've probably got too much paint in my brush and not enough water. There we go. Now, that'll calm that down a little bit more. And so as these waves right here start getting closer to your subject waves, which are the one up front, they're going to get a little bit more descript, looking like the ones up front instead of it being more organic. See? And so this is exactly how you do it. And I don't always do it like this a la prima. Sometimes it's more of a one wave at a time, and mist it and dry it and so forth. But for this demo, I need to show you how all this is going to come together. So now, up front, right here in the belly of this wave, I'm actually going to paint this wave again. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to wet the wave down to the wave in front of it, and I'm going to now repaint this color, this time working more on its graduation. And I've pre-wet the surface now, so now I'm going to get this wonderful pigment that's going to fall down into the belly of the wave. So now notice how my brush strokes are going to sort of go up the wave. I'm actually grabbing that pigment and pulling it down and into the wave with a slight curve. And when that dries, I can actually paint the actual vibration of the wave. And what I mean by that is down in the belly of the wave, there always is a little bit of vibration of water. It's a little bit wet right now to do it. When it dries, it'll be a little bit easier. But down in the belly of the wave, there are all these other little tiny, smaller vibrations that actually add texture. And these are all little places where the wave is actually gathering light. Okay? So our subject wave needs to be warmer because as objects become closer to the viewer, they also become warmer. And that goes for a field of grass or a wave or anything. So as I begin to paint this wave now and make it look different than its surroundings, I'll actually put this color on here again, very, very darkly, and then go get some water and bring that down into its own belly. And now you can see that simply using temperature, I've also communicated that we are looking into the color of this water now. Some of my students say, well, what is the color of water? I mean, the color of water is a combination of a number of different things. It's a combination of what is in the sky, what is being reflected in the sky, what is being reflected or absorbed, I should say, and coming back to your eye into things like the plankton in the water can actually affect it, and also what is underneath. Like, for instance, if you were to paint this very, very warm, then one might start to believe that there's a sandbar underneath it, and it's very shallow water. So, again, using this same color palette that we did before, going to get the right color here. I'm going to go out and do some of these other intermediate waves. How are we doing on time?
We're doing good.
Okay. I'm going to put one here because there's always a one in between. Just like mountains, you always want to know how waves weave upon themselves. You know, you never want all of these things parallel to one another. So I'm going to paint the belly of this wave down, and then I'm going to go ahead and paint some vibration in that other wave that I was working on. So let's do that real quick. Let me get this one a little bit darker. There we go. So you're looking down in the belly of these waves, you know, from our perspective. Remember, you know, you probably are, you know, up on a platform. You might be up in your condominium looking down upon this ocean scene, but you can see now that we have a stark contrast between these waves in the front and what I've actually drawn back here that's very organic. So let me start filling in that area now, and I'm not sure that I'll actually have time to get it all done, but this is pretty much my process, how I do this. And I just select an open spot where a wave needs to go. I don't really just say, you know, draw this out previously with pencil necessarily. And you'll find that when you're painting an ocean like this, you'll have a big empty spot that looks kind of awkward. You can always pop a wave in right there and fill that space in. As long as it's in keeping with your guidelines of what you set up in the very, very beginning, which is your sort of your size map, your grade map, and your horizontal lines that you may have put in there to sort of keep you working in a horizontal fashion. What I mean by that is don't necessarily line up your waves horizontally, but generally you want to show the viewer that you're standing on level ground and you're looking out. So this is where a wave needs to be in between all of those. So I can pop one of those in there and have it come down to its belly. And all of these little areas of white, you don't necessarily need to worry about. If you wanted to paint this differently and actually have some foam on top of the wave, or some lace of foam, like when you're out in the deep ocean, and particularly when you're near the shore, you know, there's always a lot of foam and there's a breaking wave and this, that, and the other, which is not what we're working on today. But if you want to do that sort of thing and you want to protect those white areas, you can actually get some latex mask, and I use Incredible White Mask. I buy it at, you know, one of the big box stores. It's made by Graphics in Ohio. It's fantastic, and this will preserve your whites of your paper and that way you can go back later after you're finished with one of the painting processes, and you can unmask that area, and you can have these brilliant whites to deal with. I want to talk a little bit more about the vibration of the wave down in the center. So
because how are you going to finish this up?
Right, so what I'm going to do now is, like for instance, this wave here, this is what I call Winslow Homer water. I've studied a lot of his work and so forth, and also works of my father, Hubert Shuptrine. And down in the wave, the belly of the wave, as this kind of sort of goes up the wave, you will have all these wonderful little vibrations. And sometimes it might look like this, where these little patterns actually go up the wave. This is where the water sort of vibrates up and goes into the dark color like this. And so when you paint that on first, it kind of looks spotted like a leopard, but then you'll go back and actually take a wet brush and very, very softly just cut across it like this, and you'll have these beautiful vibrations going up the wave. So that's how I usually do it. Sometimes I'll start out here in a very organic fashion. Notice along the horizon line, I've left it very broken. I've left places where white is visible, and in order to soften all that and make that all look like it's out of focus, I'll actually go back later at the end of the painting and drag a wet paintbrush along here and soften all of these hard edges, because I actually want all of those edges way back there in the distance to be very, very soft, as if they're going out of focus. And then as I get closer and closer toward the viewer and bring the painting toward the viewer in the very, very front, I will actually let these be harder lines. Okay, probably have enough time for one more wave in the very, very front, and I'm going to do that one really quick. It's going to be a much, much warmer color even still than my even closest one, and it's going to make that one look even better. But right here, I'm actually going to put a wave that will come up and not be parallel to that one necessarily, but it will be right here. Much longer wave than the one right behind it. And now you can see how the vibration of that one right behind it actually is affected. So, okay. So that's pretty much how to do basic ocean waves. To do things like I've been doing in some of my coastal scenes recently, where I've been using mask on some of the waves, and I've been using lace and so forth, and foam in the wave. You can refer to a number of my YouTube videos and demonstrations. But also, if you want to learn more and get more in depth, please take one of my watercolor workshops, and would love to see you in that.
And Greenville is?
And Greenville is in South Carolina, and the next workshop is coming up July 25th and 26th.
Okay.
And thank you guys so much for tuning in, and No Fear Watercolor. Here we go again. Everybody take care, and I'll see you next time.